Hello, my name is Mark, and I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Smatter Effect, a YouTube channel dedicated to entertainment that I love. Things like video games, movies, TV shows, and music. Today we'll be talking about a movie I really love, Tremors. I'll be reviewing it and telling you why I love it so much. Combining Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward together, they're both great. You mix horror and comedy in a great movie, and it's fantastic. This movie has a lot going for it, with great horror, great comedy, great characters you really learn to love and care for. And let's go on with the plot. What's this movie about? This movie is about a small town called Perfection, Nevada. It's not a real place. It's only got about 14 people total. Here we have Andy List for those of you who are keeping score. So we have Val and we have Earl, a couple of hired handymen, who are going about their daily lives, doing dead-end jobs, and they bicker and banter all day long, pushing each other, but deep down inside they really love each other. They decide to go meet the new college student in town. Her name is Rhonda. She's a seismologist, and she's got some seismology machines out there taking readings, and those readings are way off the charts. So she asks Val and Earl if anybody's doing any blasting around town. Val and Earl will say no, but they're heading back into town anyway, so they'll ask around for her. So far in the movie, we're just seeing a snapshot of what every day is like for these characters, and I just love every minute of it. The relationships they're building, the world they're building, just great. When Val and Earl arrive at Walter Chang's market, they run into Melvin, who is one of those people you just love to hate. He's a little punk teenager anyway. Walter Chang, the owner of the store, is talking to Bert and Heather Gummer, a couple of survivalists. They're having a discussion about bullets and how the bullets that Walter ordered for them just aren't meeting their needs. Anyway, Val and Earl ask around about Rhonda's seismology machines showing weird readings, and no one knows what they're talking about. So anyway, Val and Earl get back to work once again, and they're just so frustrated with their lives. And after one mishap too many, they decide to leave town. And on their way out, they're offered a job. And that job offers free beer, and that's from the local artisan named Nancy and her pogo stick loving daughter Mindy. Val and Earl, happy with themselves, leave town. The end. Just a heads up, we're moving past the initial plot of the story and we're going to start heading into spoiler territory. So for those of you who don't want to be spoiled, we're going to talk about spoilers now, so you've been warned. So far we have the small town with characters that are well fleshed out with great relationships. And then we have to add the horror element, and this is where the monsters come in and ruin it for everybody in town, but not for us. These monsters were originally conceived as Jaws underground, land sharks, and they're so creative in the use of camera work, angles, practical effects, the way they grab people, the way these monsters are instantly recognizable to fans of Tremors and to horror. These big sandworm-looking creatures start hunting people and animals in the town, using vibrations in the ground to hunt. But our heroes, these characters are not helpless, and they eventually learn how to avoid being eaten by these monsters. However, the monsters then start adapting to the humans fighting back. And this all leads to some really great stunt work, some really great action, and a really thrilling finale. It makes a great movie. So Val and Earl are headed out of town, and on their way out of town, they run into a guy sitting in an electrical tower. They pull over to the side of the road and they decide to take the guy down. And when they get up there, they discover he's dead. So they take him to the local doctor. The doctor says, hey, he died of dehydration. He's been sitting up in that tower for a few days. And they scratch their head over that and wonder what's going on. So they decide to leave. And when they do, they go past a couple of guys working on the side of the road, doing some kind of drilling work out there, which they said earlier no one was doing any drilling in town, so that kind of doesn't make any sense, I guess. But the movie then switches over to an older guy working on his farm, and he's in the middle of working on his crops, and he looks over and he sees his sheep running around like crazy in a little pen, and he's kind of wondering what's going on. We don't know what's going on, the guy doesn't know what's going on, but the animals sure know something's going on under the ground. Later on we find out this is old Fred, and old Fred gets dead. He ends up going back to hoeing his crops, and something pulls him under the ground. And after taking out old Fred, the monster decides to go after the sheep, which we'll find out later. The camera then switches over to another part of the valley, and it shows the seismology machines going bananas. And Rhonda heads over to them and is wondering what's going on. She starts reading the papers and starts reading the machines. She then gets up and starts walking towards her car, and then we see a first-person view from the monster's point of view heading towards her. And she steps into the vehicle just the last second, closes the door, and we hear the monster kind of makes a disappointed sound, I guess. And then she drives away. The movie then switches back over to Val and Earl pulling over to the side of the road because they notice that old Fred's sheep are dead. And they head over there, and we see like a bloody, pulpy mess where the sheep were. And they wonder where old Fred is. They search his house. They look around the area. They look around the farm. And sure enough, they see a hat in the middle of his field, and Val goes over and reaches down, picks up the hat. And when he picks up the hat, we see one of the PG-13 scares that they have going for us. So if you're a little kid, you're scarred for life because you see old Fred's head sticking out of the sand, looking pretty ghastly. And their reaction is priceless. They then freak out. They start heading back into town to report this. And when they do, they stop over by where the drilling guys are, and they tell the drilling guys, hey, there's a madman on the loose. He's going around cutting people's heads off. You guys better get out of here. But they don't take Val and Earl seriously. They just think they're pulling their chain. But then they get killed as they start drilling. And now the movie is firing on all cylinders. Val and Earl are freaked out. They start freaking out the townsfolk when they start telling people that old Fred's dead. Edgar, the guy sitting in the electrical tower, he's dead. So they're reporting all this to these people, and they're like, wow, that makes no sense. What are you guys talking about? People dead? What? So these people are not used to this kind of thing. They're actually taking it pretty well because they just don't get what's going on. So Val and Earl try to use Walter's phone. The phone is dead. And one of my favorite lines of all time is Walter saying, I didn't do it. And now Val and Earl are headed back out of town. But they can't cross into the next town because there is now a rock slide where those drilling guys got killed. And when Val and Earl get there, they notice there's guts everywhere. And they freak out once again. And they back up into a hill. And they can't move. And then Val and Earl complain and squabble with each other over why they're not moving. And Earl tells him it's because he's hung up. And Val tells him he's not hung up. And he fights with the truck, gets it going again, gets all the way back into town. And when they get into town, the townsfolk are wondering, hey, Val and Earl, why are you coming back? Why are you back again? Well, weren't you supposed to go tell the authorities about what happened? And sure enough, when they're coming out, they see the first sign that what they're dealing with is not a murderer, but a monster. So they look under the truck, and they see this worm-like creature with his teeth stuck around the axle. And Bert Gummer goes down there and grabs him and looks at it and goes, this thing stalled your truck? Val and Earl are like, hey, yeah. And they talk about what was eating Fred's sheep, and he says not one of these little suckers could eat all of Fred's sheep. The camera then pulls back, goes overhead looking down, and we see these people wondering what's going on in their little town. It is now nighttime, and we're at the Wallace's house. Dr. Jim and Megan are sitting in their car thinking about the next day, and their generator goes out. The lights flicker, turn off. He heads over to the generator and looks down and sees that it's in a sinkhole. Tries to pull it by its power cord. The power cord is cut. He tries to dig for it, but we see the same snake-like creatures from earlier. Next thing you know, they grab him, start pulling him into the ground, and Megan, his wife, tries to help him. She's unable to help him, and he gets pulled down into the ground. So she runs away into their car, but she notices she doesn't have the car keys. While she's fumbling around, she turns on the car radio. Next thing you know, the creatures start pulling the car into the ground. And that's the last we see of Megan. We're now at Walter Chang's market, where everyone's gathered together wondering what to do about these creatures. The CB radios that they have can't get out of the valley. The roads are blocked because of the rock slide. The phones are dead. So they come up with the idea of using horses. And Val and Earl are the best at riding horses, so they send Val and Earl off to go find help. The first stop that Val and Earl make is at the doctor's home, looking for Jim and Megan Wallace. They look everywhere for them. They can't find a trace of them. However, they do hear some music playing. They follow the source of music to the ground. They start digging. They find the grill of the car that Megan was buried in, and they freak out because they can see the headlights are still on. The music's playing. They take off and they go, "We got to get out of here." Again, Val and Earl start riding through the desert. When the horses get spooked, they throw Val and Earl off. They look down and they see that some of the snake creatures have gotten hold of the horse. They shoot at them, and all of a sudden the ground starts breaking apart, and they go, "Man, there must be 1,000,000 of those snakes in the ground." But it turns out it's just one big monster. And this is our first view of that monster, which is absolutely amazing. This thing looks so cool. The special effects, the lighting, everything like that just works out so great. And we see that when not only when it comes out of the ground, it comes out and it shoots out these snake-like things out of its mouth to grab you and pull you into it. Amazing. So when Val and Earl start running away, this creature goes back into the ground and starts burrowing towards them quickly. And when they do that, these Val and Earl, they have no other recourse but then to run away. But as they're running, there's like a ditch area, like a canal. They try to jump over the canal, but when they do, it turns out that, it's lined with concrete. And when that happens, the monster actually kills itself, bumping its head into the concrete, which is pretty cool because there's guts everywhere. And Val and Earl are ecstatic. They thought they killed the monster. They thought it's all done. And when they hear a sound creeping up behind them, it's actually Rhonda, who just happens to be working nearby. And they go up and unearth the monster. And it's pretty cool that Rhonda comes up with the idea that they use these nub-like spikes on the side of its body to move itself around under the ground. But while Val and Earl are celebrating that they just killed the monster, Rhonda tells them that there must be at least 3 more according to her seismographs, because the timings of all the seismic activity does not work out for only one creature. So Val and Earl are freaked out, Rhonda's freaked out, and they start heading over to Rhonda's vehicle, which is nearby. But when they get about halfway there, this is one of my favorite parts, is when Earl steps into a prairie dog burrow thinking he got sucked into a hole by a monster, and he starts to freak out once again. You know what? These guys are heroes in this movie, but they are so human. They constantly bicker and argue with each other. They're not perfect. They gripe and whine, complain. They are scared just like anybody else. But they step up when they need to. In the next scene, they go over to the seismology machines where they just happen to be going off, and a monster chases them onto some rocks. They sit on the rocks for a few hours, wondering if the monster's left yet. They throw something on the ground. The monster's still there. So they put it together that the monster must hear them through the rocks and through the ground and sense vibrations in the ground. That's how it hunts. After figuring all this out, they then spend the whole night there because they don't want to get off the rocks and they don't want to make noise. But they have to get away. So they have to come up with a plan. Rhonda comes up with the plan of using poles that are nearby and uses them to pole vault from rock to rock until they can get to the vehicle. So they get to the vehicle, barely escaping another monster, and they get away. The last scene was what I love about Tremors in a nutshell. Such a short scene, but the cinematography, the music, there was slight glances between Val and Earl. Earl is trying to push Val towards Rhonda because he thinks that she would be perfect for him. The way they figure out the monster, the way they try to work together to evade the monster, the way they push each other, and the way they care for each other. Great scene. And once again, they end up back at Walter Chang's market, where they try to explain to the townsfolk what these creatures are like and how they hunt and what they look like. But they spend most of their time, instead of strategizing, they spend most of their time trying to come up with a name for these monsters, especially Walter, because Walter is an astute businessman. He wants to come up with a name since they discovered them, and he comes up with the name Graboids. So from this point forward, the movie's been broken wide open because we as the viewers, we know the rules now. And the characters in the movie, they know the rules as well. So now we just have to see it all play out, and it's thrilling. So immediately after knowing all the rules of engagement with this monster and knowing the rules of how the monster hunts, what does Melvin do? He runs outside, gets a basketball, and starts making noise so the monsters can come to him. And he starts screaming. The people inside run outside to try to punch him because they think that he's just pretending to be attacked. but they look up and they see him climbing a light pole, and they know it's not a joke. It's at this point that we see a glorious shot of the monster coming out of the ground. Everyone's there. The monster comes out of the ground full force, opens up. The little tentacles come out of the inside of the mouth. We see it in its full glory. It's amazing. It's at this point that there is someone still with a good excuse not to know what's going on, and that is Mindy. Mindy's jumping up and down on a pogo stick. Val runs over, grabs her just in time before the monster does. Val runs one way, Mindy and Nancy run another way into their house. Val jumps onto Val and Earl's truck. During that time, the monster tries to attack him, pulling down the truck, eating away at its tires. Things really start to heat up because Val's being attacked on the truck, and we see Earl and Rhonda, and they're horrified for Val, but they look over and they notice a monster coming from another direction. Things really start to get crazy because everyone separates. We have Mindy and Nancy inside their house. We have Melvin sitting on a light pole. We have Nestor on top of his trailer. So Earl and Rhonda, somehow they separate. Earl runs back to the market. Rhonda doesn't. And when this happens, we see some of the best practical effects in horror. We see the monster movements. We hear the sound effects, we see the character reactions, we see the mud, the dirt, the blood, and this is all happening to characters we actually care about. They all have personalities. We've seen them grow over the course of this movie, and we don't want anything to happen to them, and that's what makes this so thrilling. So when that intense scene finally ends, we have Val and Rhonda sitting down for a moment. Val's tending to her wounds, and you think, hey, finally everything's calmed down again and we can kind of relax. But no, we have a vending machine that starts making a lot of noise. They run over to pull the plug before it attracts the monsters, but you know what? Too late. Walter was over there trying to help, and guess what? The monster comes up out of the ground, sinks a couple of those snakes into his back, pulls them into the monster, down into the ground, under the store. Walter's dead. The characters in the store don't get to lament that Walter just died because another monster comes out of the floorboards of the store right after them, and the monster uses his tentacles to start pushing over the shelves while these characters are standing on them. So they go to the roof, except for Rhonda. Rhonda gets pushed out of the window. Rhonda runs over to the nearest water tower, climbs it, and gets out of the way. But during that time, Val and Earl were looking for her, but she's safe. One of the little touches that I really love about this movie is the fact that Rhonda climbs the water tower, gets to the top. Val and Earl are screaming, yelling, looking for her. And they look over, they see that she's safe. And they say, hey, Rhonda, hey, good job, you got out of the way. And what does Rhonda do? Rhonda doesn't say a word. She gives them the thumbs up because she knows if she makes noise, they're going to come after her. So everyone decides to get up on their roof so that way they get out of the reach of the monsters. And at this time, Bert and Heather, who were not at the meeting in the market, do not know the rules of the monsters yet. So they get back to their house after, I guess, doing some reconnaissance work, looking for the monster's spore. And while they're doing that, they happen to look over with the binoculars. They see everybody's up on the roof. And so they try to communicate with them with their CB radio over at Walter's place. They lower Val down to pick up the CB radio. Val picks it up. They start communicating this way. We then hear Val trying to warn Bert and Heather about the monsters, but they weren't at the meeting, so they don't understand. But at this point, Heather turns on a tumbler, which causes vibrations. The monsters start heading towards their house. Val tries to scream at them, telling them over the radio to get on their roof. They don't really understand. A lot of fans out there will argue that this next scene is the best scene in the whole movie. I don't necessarily agree, but it's fantastic. We have a couple of survivalists waiting their whole lives to use their whole arsenal of weapons, and they finally have an excuse with a graboid coming through the wall of their basement. They immediately start grabbing everything off their walls. They have their shotguns, their machine guns, their flare guns. They finally use an elephant gun to take the thing down. So after the monster goes through its extensive death throes, they pick up the radio, call Val and Earl, and let them know that they killed the monster. So now we're down to 2 graboids left, and everyone's celebrating. But we soon find out that the monsters have a new trick. They decide to start messing with the structures that everyone's standing on, trying to knock them off to be able to get to them. And this is bad news for everyone, but especially Nestor, because Nestor is sitting on a trailer. We see this cool special effect of the monster's head coming out of the ground, ramming the trailer, knocks Nestor off. Nestor scrambles, and everyone yells, hey, Nestor, get up off the ground, get up higher. And what does he do? He jumps on a tire that's maybe a foot off the ground, lays down on it. The monster sucks him down from below. Nestor's gone. The monster then turns its attention to Melvin, who's sitting on a tin roof on top of a little shack. Melvin starts whimpering, crying for help, but no one can help him because there's nothing they can do. So our heroes have to come up with a plan, and they come up with the plan of using a tractor that's about 30 tons and using that to drag a trailer, put everybody in the trailer and use that as armored transport to get themselves out of the valley. In a very tense scene, Val ends up successfully getting the tractor and the trailer and picking everybody up and then heading up to Bert and Heather's house. As they drive up in the trailer, we see Bert and Heather on the roof making bombs. They then throw all their baggage and their guns into the trailer and we drive off out of town. At this point, everything's looking great for the survivors. They're in armored transport, they're headed out of town. They see activity way ahead of them, but they figure the monsters can't hurt them, so they start celebrating early, thinking, oh wow, big deal. But it turns out that the monsters were actually setting a trap for them. And that trap was weakening the ground, so when they drove the tractor over it, the tractor sunk in, and now they're stuck on a trailer in the middle of nowhere. Since the monsters are super sensitive to the vibrations in the ground and sound, they decide to use one of Bert's bombs by throwing it on the ground. When it goes off, the monsters flee the area and they run over to the nearby rock formation. With everyone safe and sound sitting on the rocks, Val, Earl, and Rhonda start talking about how they were earlier trapped on rocks and they pole vaulted out. But they know very well they can't pole vault out of this situation and they starting to sound hopeless. Which then leads to the next scene, which is the most controversial to me. I would really like comments and suggestions, ideas on this next scene because I cannot for the life of me understand this part. From what we know of the characters, I believe they wouldn't act like this. So we have Val, Earl, and Rhonda giving up basically. They're done. They think it's over. And Heather and Bert are saying, hey, why are you giving up? So we have this back and forth between Bert and Val yelling at each other, and it eventually caps off with them being pulled apart. Val tells Earl that if the Graboids don't kill Bert, Val will, which is completely out of character for me. So here we are a few hours later, everybody's lying on the rocks, resigned to their fate, talking about dying. Bert comes up with an idea saying that when it comes down to it and he's dying of starvation, he's going to go out there, light up a bomb and let the monster pull him down with it, and he's going to blow up the monster. Val laughs. Once again, reinforcing that same idea that they hate each other. I don't understand. Okay, whatever. So Earl takes that idea and says, you know what? Maybe we can go fishing. Maybe we can use a line on the bombs, throw the bombs out, make vibration on the ground. The monster grabs the bomb, pulls it underground, and then blows itself up. So he pulls out his fancy lasso tricks, uses a bomb, throws it on the ground. The monster gets it, pulls it down. Boom. Next thing you know, it's dead. It's completely blown up from the inside. Great special effect. Aha, but there's one monster left, and that monster is Stumpy. The one that grabbed onto Val and Earl's truck earlier, and they pulled a tentacle out. They call it Stumpy now. And Val says that this Graboid is his. So he decides to grab a bomb, throw it out. Stumpy grabs the bomb, pulls it into the ground. Everyone starts celebrating already, but Stumpy is not stupid. He shoots the bomb out of its mouth towards them. And when it lands on the rock formations, it lands on the other bombs. Everyone scatters off the rocks, and the bombs go off. After all that commotion, Val, Earl, and Rhonda are sitting in the middle of nowhere. Everybody else makes it back onto the rocks. And they have one bomb left. And Earl and Rhonda want Val to throw that last bomb so they can get back onto the rocks. But Val doesn't want that because they'll just end up dying on the rocks. So they decide to have Stumpy chase them to the edge of a cliff. So when they go to the edge of the cliff, Stumpy's still chasing them, so he throws the bomb behind Stumpy, and when that happens, Stumpy's pushed forward going over the cliff and eventually splatting on the ground. So Val and Earl and Rhonda all celebrate the monster's death. They look over, they see the other townsfolk on the rocks. They're celebrating as well, but they're still not getting off the rocks even though the last monster's dead, which is pretty funny to me. So we have a final wrap-up of the movie. We have Rhonda coming over, taking a picture of Val and Earl, saying that there's some scientists coming into town and she's going to be in on the research. And we have Val and Earl getting new tires for their truck. And we have Val being goaded by Earl to go over and kiss Rhonda. And so we see Val chasing Rhonda and giving her a big smooch at the end. The camera pulls back and we are treated to a Reba McEntire song. The end. Ultimately, this is one of the most rewatched movies in my entire collection. And I think it's because it has great special effects, great soundtrack, great cast, great characters, great setting, and the characters make smart decisions, the monsters make smart decisions. Everything comes together for an hour and 30 minutes of pure entertainment, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did, and I hope you love this movie as much as I do.